Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to the Caspian Game Awards. So we actually haven't done one of these in a while, so admittedly I need to kind of get back to the groove of things. But anyways, welcome back to another episode. Today we are actually going to be going over the Caspian Game Awards for 2018. So this is actually going to be a weird one because this is actually, I think, the first time. Yeah, this is actually going to be the first year that we'll be talking about that isn't where it was like kind of pre me being on Twitch. This isn't before me being on, social media in general, because I was doing YouTube way before this. But as far as like games that we're going to be talking about, like, it's going to be a bit weird because now we're just kind of past the, me talking about stuff that was basically released during the time whenever I was doing Twitch. So now we're actually at the point where we're going deep into kind of getting closer to my teenage years, which is kind of weird. So that's pretty interesting. But either way, of course, if you guys haven't, please hit that follow button down below and turn the bell icon so you'll be notified exactly when I'm streaming. It definitely helps me out. But yeah, no, like, I'm pretty excited to go over this and, just kind of continue talking about these, award ceremonies and just kind of improving them. So, and for those who don't know what this series is, it's basically where I pretty much look at a bunch of the video game awards that were done in the past and basically changing it to where, like, what my nominees would have personally been, as well as what I would have thought would be the winners for respective awards. And it's essentially our own sort of, award ceremony in exchange. So hence the you guys clapping at me, of course. But in all seriousness though, like, I basically like doing these just so I can have fun and also just kind of have my personal takes on what I personally think would have had the awards. So yeah, but in any event, yeah, 2018. Well, I think I gotta be honest with you guys. 2018 is a really weird year because obviously we've talked about every single other like year from like 2019 onwards, which, by the way, for those who haven't already, please check out our other streams on the Caspian Game Awards. They are all currently saved on my Twitch. I will be saving them all on my YouTube. But as far as like, that goes, go watch those. But yeah, like, we've talked about some pretty bad years, like 2022 and 2021 being like the biggest culprits. Yeah, 2018, like, this one's a really weird year, if I'm gonna be honest, because it's like, I mean, this isn't like I don't want to say this is like the worst year that we've covered so far, but it's definitely going to be one of the weakest, because whenever I was doing my research, yeah, there were definitely some games that like easily qualified, in my personal opinion. But like, there was just a lot of games that like just were not that good whenever like they were released. And so because of that, I naturally can't nominate them for this list, and that sucks. Because like, there were some, don't get me wrong, the games that did come out this year that were good, holy shit, they were really fucking good. Like, obviously we'll get into those in a little bit, but like, as far as like outside of like the examples I'm going to be talking about, yeah, this was just a very bland year as far as gaming. And that sucks because it's like, a lot of people do think that this is one of the best years, but whenever I looked at it, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, but as far as like everything, let's get into the categories. So, unfortunately, tying into what I just said, this is unfortunately going to be the first year that I will not be nominating a shooter game for. Yeah, unfortunately, that should pretty much tell you that as far as like shooter games in general, this year was really bad. It was worse than 2021. and you thought 2021 was pretty bad. No, 2018 was worse. Because, like, if I'm going to be honest, I only found two games that would have counted. And since you guys know that, like, I'm someone who has to have at least 4 nominees on here, I can't do that. Thankfully, everything else, every other category that we have thus far, they do have their own respective thing. So, best indie game, so best independent / single developer based game. Best game by a new studio, which we didn't do last time, but we did in 2020. It's basically just the best game by an up-and-coming studio at the time that I personally think, especially with the power of hindsight, I think was definitely a better thing. And then action-adventure is just general sort of, action/adventure games. Then you got best RPG, so role-playing games. Sim strategy games, I'll help him in a little bit. There's best sim strategy games, so simulation and strategy games, whatnot. And then, well, this is the first time that I can actually confidently say that we're going to be doing a sports/racing/fighting game category. So we finally reached a year where those can qualify. And of course, we got best multiplayer, and then we have the best DLC/expansion. And then we have best remake/remaster, and then best art direction, so visual style, best narrative, so best storytelling, and then the game of the year titular category. So these are all the categories that we will be doing for tonight's episode. So, but of course, before we get into this, just a reminder of the rules that we have in the series. So this is the most important one. It has to be a game that released between January 1st and December 31st of that year. No weird cutoff points. We are counting the entire year as a whole. So, no weird, middle of the year cutoffs or like the last 4 months of the previous of the previous year. And then, like, the first 8 months of, like, the year after that. None of that bullshit. We're doing fully in that entire year. So, very important rule. Another important rule is that it had to have been a decent to good launch for that game. Games fixed after the fact will only apply by a case-by-case scenario, depending on how good the game ended up becoming. Because I don't want to reward games that launched like shit only for them to get fixed like 3-4 years down the line. That's bad. That's a bad that is a bad practice in the gaming industry that has become way too common, and I'm not going to reward that. So, like, only in very rare cases will I actually be doing that. I have not done that yet. So, yeah. Also, no early access games. So, no games that are not fully released. So, there were plenty of games that did have early accesses in 2017 and 2018. Obviously, we're talking about 2018 here. I will not count those. So, Deep Rock Galactic, for example, that does not qualify, as that game came out in 2020 as a whole. Same thing with Hunt Showdown. That game was released in early access in 2018, but it didn't have a full release until 2019. If you guys want to hear more about those, go check out the previous lists. So, because we're going from recent down. So, and then as for games that are going to be nominated for Game of the Year, it has to be roughly around an 80% or higher score from Metacritic or other related news places to be an acceptable spot. And it has to be a completely new game, so no remakes or remasters are allowed. And then, of course, last but not least, I'm choosing games that I am personally interested in. I'm not going to be choosing games based off of, other people's opinions. This is my personal opinion, because to me, art style, aesthetics, and all that stuff matters to me the most. And of course, that then leads into your guys' opinions. So, because if you disagree with me, that is completely fine. This is just my personal list, and these are just my personal choosings of what I think are the best candidates for these respective awards. So do keep all of that in mind. So, but yeah, before we actually start this, I'm going to check up on my cat because I did hear him crying earlier. So I'll be right back in a second. All right, I'm back. So yeah, that's kind of the general rules. So let's actually get into the show. So yeah, let's just jump right into this. First off, oh shoot, before we do anything, I forgot. Where is it? I think it's over here. Yes. The return of the envelope. The most important thing that you can have on this stream. So, all the winners are in here. So, that is pretty fun. But, okay, anyways. Best indie game. So, best game by a smaller studio. So, and obviously, as I'm doing these, I will be comparing the closest category to what was actually in the official Game Awards first. And then I'll be giving my personal takes on all that and just kind of showing you my personal choices for what they should have nominated and all that fun stuff. So, best indie game. So, okay, I've got to be a bit real with you guys. Around, I'd say like 2016 to about 2018-ish, I really wasn't the biggest fan of indie games in general. I know, I'm sorry, it's just, this wasn't really like particularly a good time for me, because for me, you guys know, I'm way more interested in games that have a more realistic style to them and take themselves a bit more seriously. I never really liked any of the indie games that were either just straight up, clearly just like Super Nintendo throwback looking games, which that's not a bad thing, but just every single every single indie game at this time either looked like that or they had like a very cartoonish looking aesthetic that just I did not vibe with at all. And well, unfortunately, the ones that did end up getting the nominees were mostly that style. If that's totally your jam, that is completely fine, but I don't like that. I don't like those stuff. I don't typically like those types of indie games, especially since like a lot of those tend to get way more attention than the indie games that I actually personally like. So, what were the games that they chose? So, yeah, they ended up choosing Celeste, Dead Cells, Into the Breach, The Messenger, and Return to Obra Dinn. So, Okay. Admittedly, okay, I know of Celeste. I know a lot of people like Celeste. I honestly don't really know anything about Celeste. I know it's a platformer, and I know it's like an old school looking platformer game. That I do know. It just does not appeal to me whatsoever. Like, I don't know, it just never really was my thing. Like, and I know that is a bit sacrilege for many of people out there. Like,
What a shame.
let me finish, okay? But like, I don't know. It's just for me. I guess it just really depends on the like just the vibe. And when compared to something like Shantae, where it has a very as like its own sort of like unique take on something like this. I don't know, just kind of changing it into more of a like I think this is like a Canadian sort of locale thing. I don't know, that just doesn't really appeal to me as much as like a Middle Eastern esque setting. I don't know, it just doesn't really appeal to me as much. So I don't know, just snowy stuff in general. I just have always been very mixed on as far as like locales. So and then we got Dead Cells, which of course is I guess it's kind of a roguelike, though. And I know slight spoiler alert for some of the um lists that we've done before. I've been nominating Dead Cells DLC for a while, but I guess it's more so just because I like the visuals of this game. This game has a very cool like art style. Um like this is more of that sort of like, old school look that appeals to me a bit more rather than just kind of a more grounded look with Celeste. Like this more like fantasy like souls like sort of like almost like I guess souls. I don't want to say souls like, but just kind of definitely Castlevania influence sort of like vibe, which is funny because they would eventually have a Castlevania DLC. But there's just that sort of vibe. I think it looks way more cooler in my opinion. So I do agree with Dead Cells being nominated. Into the Breach. I don't know. Like it just feels too plain looking. And while the gameplay looks like it's fine, it has a very similar gameplay to something like, or at least from what I can tell, it's like a turn-based tactics sort of strategy game. Or at least that's kind of what it seems like to me. That's cool and all, but just the visuals, I just don't really hold it. Because again, aesthetics matter to me more. So if anyone gives me shit for that, I'm sorry. It's just if a game visually doesn't appeal to me, I'm not gonna care. And this isn't like the worst looking game. It's just not really for me. However, a game like The Messenger, I have zero appeal for at all. Just that sort of new age, almost clearly 80s looking thing. I've always hated. You guys have heard about me rant about this type of stuff for years now. I'm not going to repeat myself. But suffice to say, The Messenger is one of those types of games where it's just that sort of clearly 80s like inspired look I just hate so much. So no thanks. And then we've got Return to Obra Dinn, which I'm actually not going to lie. This game does look very unique. I will give it credit where credit is due in that regard. But I don't know. I guess it's just because it's a more of a narrative-driven game. It just doesn't really appeal to me. Again, games that are just straight up story-based games have always just been a bore for me. Like, like something like Night in the Woods, or something like what's another example of a game like that? Or like more grounded, I guess more just like kind of games like that that are not necessarily like games that are extremely grounded, but just have a lot of like exposition and just straight up just nothing but just talking. Oh, I just thought of another game like about that. A certain friend of mine is gonna be pissed about this one, but I don't care. Omori, like games like that. I have just never had an appeal to games like that. Like, granted, this one's a bit different because this is on like a ship, and it's more of kind of like a, I don't want to say pirate thing, but just kind of like sort of era-esque sort of thing going on. So it's more different than those. I will give it credit, and because of its unique pixelated 3D look, I think it looks pretty cool. But best indie game, I don't know. What I can tell you is that Celeste ended up being the one that won. No surprise. I'm pretty sure most people would have probably said that because like this is the game that like again I know of, but just isn't really for me. So what I actually would have chosen instead? Well, these are all the games that fit with me way more. So Dead Cells, out of all of them, I think Dead Cells works the most. But I'm going to exchange the others for Subnautica, The Forest, Frostpunk, and Dusk. So Subnautica, for those who don't know, is a... Well, actually, I may as well explain both Subnautica and The Forest. They're both survival games. But with Subnautica, it is a ocean survival game, and then The Forest is just kind of a almost survival horror game going on. Like it has like it's like borderline survival horror. And as far as Subnautica is concerned, it honestly isn't really that different from a game like Minecraft, where you have tons of exploration and you go around gathering resources, building up your base, and there's actually a goal for you to be able to get off the planet because it's an ocean planet. That's pretty cool. And as far as visuals concerned, Subnautica is a very beautiful looking game. Like, it has a very vibrant color palette, and that's something that I will give credit where credit is due with this game. And truth be told as well, its sequels, I think, are pretty cool as well. So, as far as like survival games are concerned, I think Subnautica actually... I'm actually genuinely surprised that Subnautica didn't even get nominated, because it is an indie game. Like, this was one of the studios, like, I don't want to say earlier games, but it definitely was one of the studios, like, biggest known game at the time. So, I don't know, this is really bizarre that Subnautica just did not get the nod. So, same thing with The Forest. Like, this was another game that, like, granted, The Forest, I will admit, it does have its problems. Like, there are some issues with jank, especially in certain parts of, like, the overarching map. That I do get. But as, like, a straight-up survival indie game is concerned, I'm still surprised that, like, it didn't at least get a nod. Like, not even, like, a multiplayer nod for this. Like, it's like, what? Especially since, like, here's the thing, Subnautica and The Forest back in 2018 and even into like 2019, these were some of the most streamed games at the time. Like, these were huge games on Twitch and YouTube. So, like, I'm genuinely shocked that, like, these did not even get a peep of just anything. So, and shit, I'll even straight up say this, like, I've actually been wanting to stream The Forest for a while. I just haven't been able to because of just, weird times with, like, everyone else. So, like, yeah, no, like, The Forest, I'm genuinely surprised, like, didn't at least even get a nod for, like, multiplayer even. So yeah, suffice to say, big L that these two were not even honorable mentions. And frankly, the fact that Frostpunk was not mentioned either, that's a crime. That's a crime on humanity, because this game is insane. Like, this is by the same developers as This War of Mine, which, if you don't know, back in 2014, it was kind of their big breakout game. And this is the game that they made after that in 2018. And damn, this game is insane. It's also pretty depressing. It's like borderline grimdark. Like, but like as far as city builders are concerned, because this is a city builder, it's easily one of the best, and I do highly recommend it. And then last but not least, we've got another one that I'm okay. I'm not entirely surprised that it wasn't nominated because the Game Awards cutoff date is November of the year before. So this came out in like the tail end of 2018, but Dusk. So I know I have given some shit to Dusk before. However, as far as Quake clones are concerned, this one actually does stand out, mostly because of its, locales being sort of like a it has a very occult sort of aesthetic that isn't really like anything else that tries to do that, especially in this type of genre. Like it's like a very dingy locale where it's like you feel like you shouldn't even be here. And that's kind of the appeal of a game like Quake. And so it takes that sort of inspiration, and hell, it may even have like a voice actor or two from a few games that we've actually played in the past in the same like sort of genre of retro shooters. So yeah, suffice to say, I do think that Dusk does deserve at least a nominee for Best Indie Game. But of course, let's get into the winner. So let me pull up the thing. Here we go. All right, so first award of the night. The award for the best indie game of 2018 goes to Frostpunk. So, yeah, no, like I said, the fact that this wasn't even nominated is a crime, because this is easily the best indie game of 2018. And yes, it is an indie game. But as far as my reasonings as to why, as I already mentioned, this game has a very unique premise for its city builder concept. It's an alternate 1890s, 1880s scenario where you basically have to survive a global freezing event, and you build up your city, but you have to manage your resources as you do so. And if you lose too many resources, well, game over, or worse. So it has that really cool, unique steampunk aesthetic with engaging resource management mechanics. And while yes, it is a very challenging game, it is still fun regardless, and I highly recommend you guys check this game out if you guys have not. It is easily worth your money and your time. So, and I'm really excited about the sequel, because, yeah, it's coming out at some point this year. But yeah, so that was the best indie games. What about the best game by a new studio? This is different, because best game by a new studio, by our definition, is best first game that gave the studio. It's basically the best game by a studio that basically got their attention from said game. So I didn't do this last time with 2019, mostly because there really wasn't anything that like stood out to me. I did do it for 2020 though. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free to watch the 2020 episode. But as far as 2018 is concerned, there were quite a few choices. Unfortunately, none of the choices that I liked were from the actual Game Awards itself. So, yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty much without saying, like, none of these games have an aesthetic that I really like at all. Again, because for me, aesthetics matter. And it doesn't matter if your game's a 10 out of 10. If your game doesn't have a look that appeals to me, I'm not going to personally play it. That's nothing to knock against the developers, though, because they definitely put their damnedest in these games. These just aren't really for me. So it also doesn't help that a game like Moss is a VR game. So a PlayStation VR game at that. So I don't know. It doesn't really appeal to me all that much. Like, basically, these games are just a bit too safe, you know? Nothing wrong with people who like safe choices. It's just doesn't really appeal to me. By the way, the Messenger was the one that won this, which admittedly I do think this is kind of one of the worst options, but what can you really do? I guess it also just doesn't help with this because here's also what I am going to say. Regardless of how you feel about all these games, one thing I will have to say is that even putting my bias aside, objectively speaking, especially with the power of hindsight, and it's been over 5 years, these are not really good picks. Why do I say that? I say that in the sense that, in my mind, a best game by a new studio means that you're putting high expectations for a studio to produce a game, like a game afterwards, that either reaches that level or even exceeds. And, well, spoiler alert, none of these games except for Moss had a sequel or had the studio make another game for this. Like, for these. So, like, yeah, suffice to say, that's where I'm coming from when it comes to, like, best game by a new studio. It's, let me compare it to best new artist from the Grammys for a second.
Don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
So the Grammys has this award called best song or best album by new art, like best new artist, right? And it's kind of the same idea that I have here. You're putting up a really high bar and really high expectations that said artist is going to be able to succeed afterwards. And, it's like the sort of Damocles sort of, story where it's like, you're foreordained to have been, the ruler, so you have to be, so you, like, have to be, as good, if not better than before. Otherwise, you're gonna die. It's kind of like that analogy. And frankly, none of these games had sequels or even had their studios make new games for any of these. So clearly, these are all mostly bad choices. Moss is the only exception, but even then, Moss Book 2 didn't really do as well as, like, people were expecting, and also it's not really a game that appeals to me. Therefore, all of these were bad choices to just kind of begin with anyways. So, with the power of hindsight, I chose games that, frankly, make a lot more sense. Obviously, most of these games were also games that we just talked about in the previous category, Subnautica: The Forest and Dusk. But then I'm also going to nominate Kingdom Come Deliverance for being a game that came out of nowhere, but was able to take the world by storm by its unique combat mechanics and use of its sort of, like, early Renaissance, late Middle Age setting. So, as far as, like, a AA game is concerned, a game where the studio's first debut game is concerned, this is really damn impressive. And, well, like I already said with Subnautica in the Forest, I think that those two games are very impressive survival games in their own right. And Dusk is a really good, callback to a lot of those old school retro shooters from back in the 90s and early 2000s. So, as far as what these games were trying to achieve, and the fact that these were all by up and coming studios or studios that finally garnered a little bit of attention, is really damn impressive. So, what did I end up choosing? Well, let's see. So the award for the best game by a new studio goes to Subnautica. Daybreaker Studios has actually been able to make some pretty awesome content after this. And frankly, like I said in the best indie category, I think that this game does have a very cool sort of it's cartoonish but not too cartoony. But it has like a really like cool water aesthetic to it. And it's not just a straight up ocean game as well. Keep in mind, because there's full on areas where you can actually go underneath into like some fire areas, which is insane. And it also helps that like there's tons of tons of tools and items and even just vehicles that you can actually create to kind of help you survive in these environments. And there's also all of the rooms and buildings that you can create for your bases, and even just kind of the storyline of trying to get off the planet. I think it's actually a pretty cool experience, and if you guys can, I recommend you guys check this game out. And the reason why this is gonna get the nod is because it is Daybreaker who made this, right? Let me double check. But either way, not only have they made a sort of spin-off game back in 2021, that being Subnautica Below Zero, and that did really well. And not only have they been killing it with like a lot of the reveals for the sequel to this game, but also Unknown Worlds. Sorry, that's what they're called, not Daybreaker. But also, they've been branching out with other games like Moonbreaker, which some people do consider to be one of the best multiplayer games that you've not played. So, as far as best game by a new studio is concerned, like, Unknown Worlds has a lot of potential. Like, I see way more potential in these guys than any of the other indie studios that were even nominated by the Game Awards. So, yeah, you got to give credit where credit is due. All right, so let's move on to the big boys now. Best action adventure. So, action adventure, platformer, and horror games. So, did the Game Awards choose the best? Because there were some pretty awesome games that came out this year, admittedly, for 2018, as far as the action adventure genre is concerned. Did they get it right? Well, yes and no. They got plenty of them right, but there's only two that I don't particularly agree with. So let's start off with the ones I do agree with. God of War, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Red Dead Redemption 2. I do actually think that all three of those are worthy of being nominated. God of War, of course, being, a sort of like, the first game in this revival of God of War. And it has a, compelling narrative about Kratos in his later life. Now he has a kid, and him just along with his son going on an adventure in, dealing with all the Norse gods now. So, as far as that's concerned, of course, gameplay and story makes sense for nominating this game for action adventure. It just makes sense. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I also do agree with this one. As a matter of fact, I'm genuinely shocked that this game just did not get the attention that it deserved when this game came out. Like, this game, I remember, like, they just did not market this game. Like, there was no marketing for this game, and as a result, it just kind of flopped in sales. And that's a damn shame, because Shadow of the Tomb Raider seems to be a pretty awesome experience. And hell, there's some people who do dare say that this is one of the best Tomb Raider games, if not the best in this, era of this trilogy. So to see it kind of just be forgotten in just kind of the midst of like the October-November 2018 release date is kind of sad. Thankfully, in where credit is due for the Game Awards, they did give it a nominee. So there you go. And then what else can I say about something like Red Dead Redemption 2? Like, a million people have already said what they needed to say about Red Dead Redemption 2 and how it's one of the best games of 2018. Rightfully so, though, to be fair, because of its, diverse locales, its unique premise and story, the fact that, like, it was able to do the Western genre justice and just sort of pushing the boundaries of what Rockstar was able to even do with open world games in general. Granted, it took them 5 years after their previous game to actually make this, but regardless, a well-deserved praise for this game is deserved. No question about that. I don't know why Odyssey's on here, though. Okay. I will fully say this. I don't hate Odyssey. I know some people shit on the newer Assassin's Creed games, specifically the RPG games. So Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. People shit on those games all the time. I don't think a lot of that criticism is necessarily warranted. That being said, I do think that, like, not only is this not, in my opinion, the correct Assassin's Creed to put this on here, this isn't even the correct category. Because, again, it's an RPG, a role-playing game. It is not an action-adventure game. You level up, and you do a bunch of quests, and you try to get better gear. That is the definition of an RPG. So I don't know why they put this in the action-adventure category. It's just kind of weird. I know why they did it, why they would do it for older Assassin's Creed games, but not this game. So, yeah. And then, well, I mean, I already pissed off everyone about what my opinions are with Spider-Man 2 and Miles Morales, but again, I don't care about Spider-Man in general. I just don't care. I never, like, long story short of it, I don't like superhero content. And Spider-Man just doesn't appeal to me, like, at all. So, granted, there are exceptions to that rule. I do think that, OGT Titans is pretty awesome, and I did like the 2022 Batman movie. But as far as, like, superheroes are concerned, I just don't care, and I never did. So, but yeah, what ended up winning? God of War. Fair enough. And I say fair enough because I did actually nominate it. And you know what? I also nominated Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Red Dead Redemption 2. But I also nominated 2 other games in the place of the others. A Way Out and Hitman 2. A Way Out is For those who don't know, it is a cooperative action adventure sort of breakout, prison break sort of game where you actually it is only cooperative. You have to play with another player, otherwise you won't be able to progress through the game. Like, you have to play with a second player, which admittedly I don't think I like that aspect. I kind of wish that there was a single player way of doing this, but whatever. That's my only critique about this. Other than that, this is a pretty unique concept where it's, and I do remember seeing the trailers for this years before this game came out. I think like 2014, 2015. Like, this game was in development for a while. And to see it be able to stand on its own and be able to tell a compelling narrative and have really, engaging cooperative gameplay is pretty awesome to see. So, granted, that being said, I can't say too much about this game. Go check out my friends' playlists on this game in particular. They did a full playthrough of the entire game. Zombie Slayer 2948 and Saimori, they both played through the game themselves. Go check that out if you guys can. But from what I can tell, yeah, no, it's weird that this wasn't nominated. So, I don't know why it wasn't. Especially since this seems like it would be the Academy's type of game. Like, I feel like you would think that, like, the award academies would actually eat this shit up, but they didn't for whatever reason. Like, that's so bizarre. I don't know. This is a weird case, but well, we're nominating it here. Where the fuck was Hitman 2? You guys know. But yeah, you guys know. I love Hitman 2. I think it's one of the best stealth games of all time. The fact that this was not nominated is also a crime. Granted, my only issue with this game is the stupid always online DRM that was applied to this game. That's the one thing I have, and I have criticized in the past too, but that's the one thing that I do actually dislike about the Hitman World of Assassination trilogy is the fact that the games were always tied to IO servers. I know it's an anti-piracy measure, but it is a shitty anti-piracy measure. Just release your game normally and just then apply some sort of a patch for you, like, to do any of that shit. You shouldn't build it into the code of the game. Other than that, though, this game is fucking amazing. Its locales are beautiful. Its gunplay in general, just gameplay, near flawless. Like, it is the definitive stealth game, and I can't praise this game enough. But of course, we're gonna give the let's give the award now, because admittedly, I feel like you guys already know what I'm gonna choose, but I don't care. Best action adventure game of 2018 will go to Hitman 2. Shocker, is it? It shouldn't surprise anyone that this wins. I mean, I declared this the best Hitman game on our Hitman tier list. Of course it was going to win. I'm biased, but I don't care. So why is this the win? So, well, here's the biggest reason. It's because even though it is built off of the same engine and like just the general same structure as the first Hitman game from 2016 in this trilogy, but the difference between this and that game is that this game vastly improved on a lot of the issues that game had, because that game was a episodic game when it first was released. And, well, truth be told, I hate episodic games. They should not be a thing. It's just waiting for content just for the sake of just kind of waiting for content. And, well, it incentivizes companies to become a bit more lazy with releasing their product over time. Trust me, as I've seen plenty of games do this trend in the mid 2010s that frankly ended up flopping. So, unfortunately, there's still some games that do this shit. I don't know why, but whatever. I'm someone who believes in having a game coming out released fully. And thankfully, Hitman 2 was a game that was released fully and ran way better than it had any right to be, especially with its anti-piracy thing. Like, this is one of the very few times that I can say that it actually ran smoothly. And I have to give credit where credit is due with IO in that. Plus, the fact that this game has tons of content. This game came out with, I think, 6 maps, and then it came with 2 like other ones, like for DLC. And on top of all of that, even added in all the maps from the first game. This was easily your best bang for your buck. So, and of course, now everything that was in this game is in Hitman 3 now. But even just putting that aside and just looking at the content that was originally released in this game is still a banger to play. And it also helps that like the rewarding, there's a ton of unlocks and rewarding stuff that you can get in this game by just playing the game stealthily and finding out your own paths into taking out your targets. Like if you try to play this like a shooter game, you're not going to have a good time. But if you try to play this as a traditional stealth game and just looking at sort of like cues and clues and like just different contexts within the world to try to come up with creative ways to take out your enemies, it is a really damn fun time. And I highly recommend you guys check this game out right now. And thankfully, with it all being in Hitman 3, you can experience the entire trilogy and its amazing sort of, gameplay, like, now, especially since, like, they sell everything like that now. So, but yeah, oh my god, my throat is starting to hurt already. I'll be right back. I'm gonna get some water. So... all right. Sorry about that. All right. Next award. Now we get into the RPG category. So this is where we see all your action RPGs, your tactic strategy RPGs, your JRPGs, your roguelikes, all that is in here. So as far as that's concerned, this is your category. So did they end up choosing good games for this? Well, here's the thing. The RPGs that were good this year were really good. Like, full stop. But a bit of a common pattern that I've seen is that with a lot of the more specific genres of games from 2018, everything else that isn't on here was either just lackluster or just so bad. So thankfully, they ended up choosing mostly some pretty good choices. I would definitely say that the best choice out of the best choices that they did get in this were Monster Hunter World, um, Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and then Octopath Traveler. Like, I'm gonna comment first on Pillars of Eternity 2 first before I talk about the other two. It's your typical sort of not Diablo. It's kind of like your Baldur's Gate-esque sort of or like Divinity sort of esque sort of adventure style RPG, like top down RPG, or even like early Fallout. Like, it's a top down old school classic style RPG in that vein. And as far as replicating those aspects of those types of RPGs, I think it's actually pretty cool. It also helps that it's not a D&D game, so, I can actually praise this game without, giving it so much shit about it being tied to a terrible company. So, and it's also made by Obsidian, which everyone, I feel like, strokes themselves when it comes to talking about Obsidian, especially since they did make Fallout New Vegas, and they made The Outer Worlds, which a lot of people really like, and they're making Avowed. They're going to release it this year, which is actually in the same universe as this, which is interesting. I didn't know that. So, guess that's something to look forward to. But then as far as, like, the really, really good choices, Monster Hunter World and Octopath Traveler, holy shit, those are the best choices that they could have ever made for best RPG for 2018. Like, Monster Hunter World, of course, took the literal world by storm because, this was the return of a series that admittedly was kind of dormant in at least the United States, because there were a few Monster Hunter games that were released in the United States, specifically the original game, Try, and then kind of a pseudo remake of the second game through the PlayStation through PlayStation Portable, but it never really caught on here in the United States in like a wide capacity. Like, it was a well-known series, but it was way more popular in Japan until Monster Hunter World came to the scene. This was the game that basically put this franchise on the map in the United States. And rightfully so, because, as far as, RPGs are concerned, Monster Hunter, I think, is a really cool, type of game where, you hunt down these giant, godlike beasts, and, not necessarily in the same way as like Shadow of the Colossus, but like just kind of in a similar vein, where your goal is to take out these giant, some of these world-ending monsters, or even just like a lot of the smaller ones, and just do a lot of side quests and stuff. But just a lot of the intricacies of just the gameplay, and even some of like the smaller narrative moments in this are pretty commendable. And just the sort of I don't want to say Aztec, but just kind of the definitely influenced by Mesoamerican, look of like some of the locales, and just kind of the, clothing and textiles and stuff. I think pretty much makes this a very unique fantasy RPG series. And honestly, like, this and Rise, I would definitely say, are like some of the best games to get into Monster Hunter if you really want to get into that franchise. So as far as like, more a more like 3D style RPG, this is easily your best pick for 2018. And then we got Octopath Traveler, which I've talked about its sequel as well, on our first thing. But yeah, no, this game is a beautiful looking game. Like, it's a throwback to the SNES era of Final Fantasy games. But this is what I actually really want more companies to do, because this was an RPG that is a AAA game. Like, it is a game that was made and published by Square Enix, but it was more of a throwback to their earlier years. And more specifically, them just kind of experimenting with some new systems being put into an older style game. And just sort of a lot of the jobs and the actual gameplay itself for this game, I think are fantastic. The story does have problems. I'm not denying that. And that is people's biggest criticism, is that people think the story sucks. I don't think it sucks, but it's definitely like it definitely has a lot of problems. So yeah. But suffice to say, Octopath and Monster Hunter, easily the best choices. Dragon Quest XI, though, no. Like, I respect Dragon Quest for being one of the earliest franchises as far as RPGs are concerned, but even diehard Dragon Quest fans would say hell no to this one. And this doesn't even count. This is a game from 2017. Like, why is this on the list? Like, I don't get that. So, yeah, no. Also, Ni no Kuni 2. I'm sorry, but like, when you compare that game to the other 3 nominees on here, like, I wish I would be able to root for it, but you're going up against 2 fucking megastars right over here, and you're dealing with like, I mean, 3 technically, if you want to be if you want to be like, you know, stingy about it, but like, come on, man. So yeah, even if you wanted to make the case that, like, you know, this is like a good RPG, like JRPG, it's not even the best JRPG on the list. So yeah. So what ended up winning? Monster Hunter World. Very respectable choice. So, but yeah, I would replace Dragon Quest XI and Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom with Kingdom Come Deliverance. Again, I'm actually surprised that this did not get a nod, because this game took the world by storm alongside some of these other RPGs. Like, and it also helps that this is an RPG that has a bit more of a realistic side to it. Like, its combat is way more inspired by, well, it's a real-time combat game, but it is a more melee-centric game. And I think that sort of helps with giving this game an identity, and just kind of raising into the ranks of becoming a knight. So, yeah, suffice to say, like, again, this is kind of representative of the problems that I have with just 2018 in general, is that the games within the categories are really good. Like, when they're good, they're really good, but like everything outside of this were not so great. Like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for example, I would not nominate that game, mostly because of the major issues that game has. So, and there were a bunch of RPGs that had a similar problem. Like, again, it was a very good year and a really bad year for RPGs at the same time. So, like, the games that were good were really good, but the games that were bad were really bad, or just mediocre. So, it made it really hard, though, to just ultimately decide which game, because it was pretty close, but I ultimately had to choose one, as, you know, I had to. So, begrudgingly, I had to choose one. So, the best RPG award for 2018 goes to Monster Hunter World. It was so close. It was so close between this and Octopath. But I ultimately chose Monster Hunter World mostly because of just the weaker writing of Octopath. But trust me, it was like thin hairs between the two. Like, Kingdom Come Deliverance is a respectable, and I respect the hell out of that game. Like, I respect the hell out of that game. But it can be a bit hard for people who are newer to RPGs. And as for Pillars of Eternity, like, it's a game that, like, doesn't really reinvent the wheel all that much. And it can be a bit hard at points because, again, it's a top-down RPG. So, like, I ultimately passed on that. So, but as far as, like, games that I do confidently, like, agree with getting the nominee, I think Monster Hunter World, it's a safe choice, but I think it is a well-deserved choice because it's a return to form for this series, at least as far as the United States is concerned. I'm pretty sure it was really popular in Japan during all this time, but just the fact that it was able to finally break down that barrier for this series to become popular in the United States, that is worth something. It also is, like I said, way more welcoming to new players. Like, it does not hold your hand, but it just helps you just enough to where you feel also much more satisfied whenever you finally take out your bosses in this game. And of course, there's tons of loot and enemies in this game. And of course, Monster Hunter has always been really good at just its beast designs as well as its locales where said beasts live in. So I have to bow down to Monster Hunter World in this respect. Octopath is still a really good choice, but if you had to like ultimately make me choose, I think Monster Hunter World is probably the better choice overall. So, again, it's really close. So, speaking of close, sim strategy games. So, yeah, all your turn-based strategy, your real-time strategy, your grand strategies, as well as like all your simulation games, they're here. Again, this was another year that like the games that were good were really damn good. Like, honestly, I would dare say that like a few of what we're going to be talking about, I do generally do consider to be some of the best games of this era, like easily. However, games that aren't on this list that kind of surrounded that were not good. So, what did the Game Awards think? Wow, it just did the fucking thing that I hate this thing doing. Okay, so it chose Into the Breach again, which, I mean, again, like, I don't know if that was the best choice. And again, unfortunately, I've got to say, I have to say this again. This is unfortunately another example of hoodie-itis here. So, because I think that, like, if you were to have made a decision out of all of these, you could have chosen Valkyria Chronicles 4, you could have chosen Frostpunk, you could have chosen Banner Saga 3, but you chose Into the Breach. Like, I'm sorry. If you like Into the Breach, that's fine. But I do think that it is the worst option out of all of these. Like, even if you wanted to give the benefit of the doubt of it being an indie game, it's not even the best indie game on this list. Frostpunk is an indie game. Banner Saga, I think, is an indie game too. So, like, yeah, I think this is an L. This is an L pick right here. So, yeah. Now, as far as Valkyria Chronicles is concerned, Valkyria Chronicles is weird because granted, this is more of a Saimori thing because like Saimori is way more in line with like these types of games. This one's an interesting game though, and like I actually did recently buy this as well as 4 because they're easily accessible on Steam. They're like an alternate World War II sort of scenario, which I think is pretty cool. And just sort of the almost XCOM style of gameplay that they have going for them. Of course, you guys know I love XCOM. I think it really does benefit in a game like this. So I recommend you guys, if you guys want to play with Anime World War II, XCOM, there you go. And then the Banner Saga kind of plays in a similar way, except as opposed to okay, it's actually kind of weird. It kind of plays in a weird hybrid of both XCOM, but also weirdly like Advanced Wars. I know that sounds weird, but like it's less. I guess it's just more so in the sense that like it has more of the simple mechanics of a Advanced Wars or just Wars game in general, but it has sort of the same overtop view head and character building of an XCOM. So, and it's a Viking game, so if you love that type of shit, there you go. So, yeah, like as far as games go, I get the nod. Obviously, I already gave Frostpunk an award, so you guys know, of course, I would support Frostpunk here. And then we got BattleTech, which this is the most interesting one because this is based off of the tabletop game of the same name. So, basically it's just giant mechs fighting each other on a tabletop. Not a bad choice. Not my first choice though. But yeah, no, Into the Breach I think is just the worst choice. Again, that's an L. That's Hoodie-itis right there. And you guys know how much I don't like Hoodie-itis, so we're to replace that with 2 Point Hospital, which is a really good game. So the 2 Point series has really proven itself to being Sega's most recent success story, especially with this first breakout game for this same studio. I think that this game is really commendable in a lot of ways. So I didn't necessarily want to choose this for best new studio. Like I didn't want to nominate this for best new studio quite yet because of just the mixed reception that 2 Point Campus had. And that sucks because it's like, I don't even think that game is bad. But as far as 2 Point Hospital is concerned, most people will say, yes, this is a good game. Granted, it's a bit of an ugly game at points. I mean, just look at those character models, but it's a charming ugly. It's like Rugrats. Or like a lot of Clapsy Supos shit. Or yes, or not shit, but like more. It's like Clapsy Supos. It's the Clapsy Supos art style. It's ugly, but it's like cool ugly. It might sound weird to say, but like if you know, you know. But regardless, it has a very like dry sense of like tongue-in-cheek humor, and I do appreciate that. Like it's a game that doesn't take itself seriously at all. Like it has no intent. Like comparing this to Frostpunk where it's like super dark, grim, edgy, just grimy, and just kind of, a bit real. Like 2 Point Hospital's like they had zero interest in being real. Like it does not take itself seriously. And yes, I do like it when my games take themselves seriously, but like sometimes you gotta have a game that just has fun. And this is one of those games. And I gotta give credit where credit is due. So, and you guys can probably already tell the battle is mostly between this and Frostpunk, but ultimately I did end up choosing a winner. So the award for the best sim strategy game of 2018 goes to Frostpunk again. So I personally really like 2 Point Hospital. I think that it is a really fun game, but I think the correct choice would be Frostpunk. I already talked about why this game is pretty great earlier, but to shorten it, it is debatably one of the best city builders. Like, just the fact that this is a very unique steampunk alternate history sort of take on the late 19th century, and just kind of the survival aspects really does make this game stand out. And just the grim dark tone of this game as well. And yes, this is a grim dark game. If you don't like that, this unfortunately isn't really for you. So, but like if you want like that sort of dreary steampunk look and just aesthetic, go check this game out. And it also helps that there's a lot of stuff that you can do even just besides the actual city building aspect. So, go check out Frostpunk. I highly recommend it to you guys. Yeah, my throat. Goddamn. Okay. Now, let's get into the first time we're actually going to be doing a sports/racing/fighting game category. Yeah, I know. This is a category that like some of you guys have probably wanted me to do. If I'm going to be honest, there's a reason why I haven't done a category like this. And, well, it mostly stems from a few things. Number one, it should be pretty obvious, but I don't like sports games in general. I mean, I've only played one sports game on stream before, and it was called Steep, and that game sucked. So, no thank you. But also, I just don't like sports in general. I've never liked sports. I hate sports. Don't make me fucking play dodgeball ever again, otherwise I will bitch slap you. So, please don't. I hate sports. And fighting games, okay, it depends on the fighting game for me, because like admittedly there's only so many fighting games that I personally like. Like, I don't know, it's just it never really was a genre that really appealed to me all that much. I don't know, it just wasn't really ever something that I cared, mostly because if I were to be playing in a 1v1 scenario, I would rather it be fighting with like dueling weapons rather than hand-to-hand combat, with akin to something like a Street Fighter or a Mortal Kombat. Like, I just don't really care for either of those. I'm more of a Soul Calibur person, if you want to be kind of a technical thing with that. Like, I like the idea of having an actual weapon that you fight with, as opposed to just using your fists. And yes, that also includes Tekken. I would not play Tekken. So, as far as racing games is concerned, they're kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. Granted, it's partially because of a certain somebody that you guys may know that is very close, to heart for me. That kind of made me at least a little bit more open to doing games like that. But I guess it's just the sense that, like, as far as racing games are concerned, I don't really have fun just kind of doing normal generic racing games. Like, I either am someone who likes either kart racers or cop chase racing games. So think like Mario Kart, for example, or like as far as like kart games are concerned, or like Um, or like as far as like car chasing games, like Need for Speed, Most Wanted, or like Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, something like that. Like just something to kind of spice up the, you know, you driving against like other guys in like a ring. That's just too bland for me. Like I want there to be a little bit of spice. So it doesn't help that like the 2010s was kind of the decade where racing games died. So yeah, but in any event, I did end up choosing just enough nominees. And you guys might be surprised with a few of the ones that I've chosen. So I ended up choosing, as far as fighting games are concerned, Soul Calibur 6 and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. As for racing games, I chose Forza Horizon 4 and The Crew 2. Now, okay, if I'm going to be honest, I didn't know if I wanted to nominate The Crew 2 on here because I know The Crew 1 just recently had a huge incident happen with it and people are fucking pissed and there's lawsuits up the ass. I get it. And I'm on your side on that, as a matter of fact. Like, A, don't fucking DRM every game. And B, don't take away people's ability to play said game. Fuck you if you do that. Actually. That being said, though, I still stand by that, like, The Crew is a dumb name. I've always thought that it was a dumb name. Because it's the Crew. Like, that's a generically dumb name. Like, it's just too generic of a name. At least for me. Like, it's not like something like Doom, where like there's a huge like presence to it. It's just like, this is my crew, man. Like that, it just makes me cringe. But anyways, dumb name aside, The Crew and The Crew 2 and even Crew Motorfest, I think are actually pretty cool in concept because you're literally going across an open world United States and doing a bunch of races throughout that entire map. That I actually will admit is pretty fucking cool about these games. So as far as, you know, innovative, racing games are concerned, that is a bit of an innovation. So I will give credit where credit is due in that regard. And as far as Horizon 4 is concerned, it does kind of a wait, Horizon 4. Oh yeah, it did have like a sort of open world thing going on. Not as much as 5, but it was kind of experimenting with it. And I respect that, especially considering that like Forza is kind of, Microsoft's response to the Gran Turismo games. Like I do respect a lot of what they do with these games because it's mostly them just kind of repolishing things up a bit with the cars. They change their cars occasionally every other time. So, and just kind of providing a quality experience, I will always respect. So, yeah, as far as like The Crew and Forza go, pretty respectable racing games from 2018. And then we get into the fighting games. Soul Calibur 6. Like I said, I am someone who does prefer Soul Calibur as a whole, and so it shouldn't be a surprise that I did nominate this on the list. And, well, truth be told as well, from what I can tell, people do really like this game. I don't know if this is in high regard in a lot of people in comparison to Soul Caliburs 2 and 3, because those are considered to be the best in this entire series. I think people do think that this is at least better than 4. I don't know how people think about this in comparison to 5, though. But regardless of just that, I think that as far as like newer Soul Calibur games are concerned, this is definitely a pretty good, like a pretty good choice. And it also helps that like this one has Geralt from The Witcher in it, so that's pretty fun to play around. And then, of course, we got Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which that might come as a huge shock from people because you guys might think, wow, didn't you say that you really hate like Nintendo in the past? Yes, actually. But here's the thing about Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This game almost got me into buying a Switch. Let me explain. So, obviously, Super Smash Bros. Huge, fighting game, huge crossover game. Everyone is excited to be able to play as a bunch of game characters, mostly Nintendo admittedly, but just game characters in general, being able to just beat the shit out of each other, right? Like, that's just kind of what Super Smash Bros.'s appeal is. And that's always been the appeal ever since the first game. Well, I almost got into this game mostly because of the potential of what characters could have been brought into for this game during its DLC life cycle. Because I made the stipulation that, like, if they did not have Master Chief, Shantae, or Sly Cooper as playable characters, that's it. No. Which, obviously, with Sly Cooper, they wouldn't have done it anyways, because that is a Sony property. But there was a chance for the other two to appear. And truth be told, technically Shantae does technically appear in the game, just not as a playable character, which is kind of dumb, but whatever. So, but there was a lot of theories that people were making theories that they were going to have Master Chief in the game. And that was backed up because, well, Minecraft's very own Steve is in the game. And, that's a Microsoft property. Like, Minecraft is a Microsoft-owned IP. So, and considering just how huge of a character that Master Chief is as far as, gaming is, like, most people who haven't even played Halo, they know who Master Chief is. So, it was not too far-fetched to think that Master Chief would be in the game. It makes sense. And it wouldn't even be the fact that, like, it would be, too mature of a character, because Solid Snake and Bayonetta are in the game too. And they both come from rated M franchises. So, it wasn't even the fact that, like, people, like, would have been afraid that, like, Master Chief would have been too of a rated M character, because they have rated M characters in the game. So, yeah, like, so obviously that ended up never happening, and thus I don't have a Nintendo Switch. But, like, I was admittedly kind of excited. Like, a part of me was admittedly a little bit excited. At least a little bit. I didn't want to admit it at the time. But even I was like, that would be kind of cool. So, that's my story as to how I almost got a Nintendo Switch. So, I mean, whatever Nintendo's next console is will probably be the console I end up owning. And hopefully it is backwards compatible with every Nintendo Switch game. If not, people are going to fucking riot. But regardless, let's get into the winner for this. So, the award for the best sport racing fighting game of 2018 goes to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Even as someone who is a cynical old man as I am, have to bow down to this game. Like, even if you can make the case that the other games are good, this game is just it's the best Super Smash Bros. Game that has ever released and probably ever will release. Because this is essentially like a love letter to not just Nintendo fans, but just gaming as a whole, especially with them bringing in a lot of characters that people have been wanting for decades, and even just bringing in a lot of more newer characters that do have a place. Granted, I don't necessarily like all of the games that are represented in Super Smash Bros. Like, I will fully admit that. Like, as a matter of fact, like, you can probably like make a guess on what games that are on this cover that I just straight up do fucking hate, and I will say that wholeheartedly. Like, there are some games that I do hate, but that's not the point. The point is that, like, even putting that bias aside, I have to give this game the nod because, again, it is essentially a love letter. It is the most content-filled game out of every Super Smash Bros. Ever. And it is just the most definitive way to play all, like, the maps from previous games and even every single character that has appeared in every other Smash game, even plus. So, it's your best bang for your buck in that regard. And as sad as this sounds, like, this is, unfortunately, from what I can tell, probably going to be the last Smash Bros. Game ever made. So, like, how can you do anything better than this? Like, I don't know, a Super Smash Bros. Platinum? Like a Super Smash Bros. Ultima? Like, I don't know how they're going to be able to top themselves, if they even wanted to, with a new Super Smash Bros. Game. But suffice to say, as far as legendary fighting games go, and as far as like legendary IPs are concerned, and just kind of legendary crossovers, this is the best crossover that anyone can probably ask for. So, let's just hope that Nintendo sticks to their word, that this is probably the last Nintendo or this is probably the last Super Smash Bros. If it is, well, they did really damn well with it, and that's why I have to give this the nod. So, yeah. As a matter of fact, I even remember a quote from a YouTuber where it's like, you know, whatever the newest Super Smash Bros. Game is, that's the best Super Smash Bros. It's kind of one of those situations where it's like, you know, the newer it is, the better. So, and that's my mentality with this. So, let's just hope they actually fucking keep their promise. And if they do end up adding one of those 3 characters in whatever console that it's on, oh boy. Okay. So, I have enough tolerance to respect Super Smash Bros. Even if I don't like everything within that game. There's still plenty of other things in that game that I do like, to where I can just put aside personal bias and be like, okay, I can respect this, even if it's not my thing entirely. I cannot say the same thing about the nominees for this multiplayer category, especially for 2 of the games that are going to be represented on here, on which I have ranted constantly about for years now, and I've never changed my mind. Like, it's been 7 fucking years since these 2 games basically just kind of fucking took over, and frankly, I'm not having it. So, but anyways, Jesus fucking Christ, this is gonna suck. Okay. So, multiplayer games, or at least mainstream multiplayer games back in 2018. You can probably already guess what games are going to be on this. And as you can see with just how kind of pessimistic I'm looking right now, you guys know I am not excited to talk about this, because let's just say that one of these games is literally the fucking bane of my existence, and it has been like that ever since it came out, And ultimately, I fucking despise the game for what it represents. So, let's go over it. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah. You see that. We'll ignore that for a little bit, but let's go over the other nominees. Sea of Thieves. A game that launched... Oh yeah, a pirate game where you could not find the treasure. Why? Because there was little to no content in the game when it first came out. It was even more shallow than fucking No Man's Sky when it came out. And that game was shallow as hell when it first came out. And this is by Rareware, by the way. Same company that everyone and their mother praises. So to see them make this is a bit of a fucking pain for a lot of people. Granted, it just proves people like me, who I personally never really found Rareware to be that great to begin with. It's just another example of their legacy just tarnishing itself. And no amount of updates is going to change my mind. Sea of Thieves is what launched a sixth of what it should have been. And even if it's better now, it doesn't matter. Get your launches right and release a full-fledged game at launch. I don't know why it's hard to explain that. So, L-Take. Black Ops 4. Yes, I streamed this game a lot when it first came out. But may I remind you, this is the same game that I made a full rant about how they just released every fucking map, like every single zombies map, broken, and just completely abandoned the actual core multiplayer, their actual audience, with some shitty battle royale that ended up being obsolete anyways because they would replace it with Warzone. So, and then we've got Destiny 2, which, by the way, it's not even, they didn't even nominate the base game of Destiny 2. They nominated an expansion, which, by the way, you cannot play this expansion ever, because Bungie removed it back in 2021. They removed the base game and every single expansion from 2017 to 2020. So, and they have no plans on bringing any of that shit back. It's in the Destiny vault. Sorry. So if you wanted to be there, well, if you want to be able to play this shit, well, fuck you. You don't have access to it. So, as you can probably tell, those are terrible fucking choices. And then we have the fucking shitty corporate garbage that is literally on your far left. A game that I've always hated, and I will continue to fucking hate, even if some of my closest friends still love the game and they still give me shit for it. I don't care. I've always hated this game. I'm not going to name it, by the way. I've never... Okay, I directly named it several times before, but I don't respect it enough to fucking call it by its actual name. It's just a piece of garbage game. It's always been garbage. It's just corporate schlock where it just represents everything I despise about modern gaming. Shitty, cartoony art style. Gameplay that just frankly is either boring or fucking obnoxious. A frankly toxic fan base. A battle, like a paid system to where it overprices everything in like the store that like every game started to adopt because of that. the excessive just, brands and companies and sponsorships that have just been swallowed up by that said game. And just the shitty, mobile looking UI that has been in every single fucking game since. And to top it all off, a game franchise that literally killed their developer's original franchise and just spat in the face of their original fans. Unreal and the Unreal and Unreal Tournament fucking died because of this game. You can't play those games anymore. If you want to fucking, play them on Steam, well, too bad. They removed them from Steam. And also GOG. You can't fucking play the same game that was the fucking basis of this engine years ago. 2.5 decades ago. So the legacy, the fucking legacy of Epic Games, the fucking franchise that even made this franchise possible, you can't even fucking play anymore. Not to mention them working on an Unreal Tournament 4 back in 2014 with fans, with dedicated fans of theirs, and then just canceling it because, hey, we're making billions of dollars over here. We're making all sorts of fucking money. Why should we bother with all these, pathetic losers who just wasted their own time just helping developing a game for ourselves? It don't matter. We're making millions of dollars. No. Fuck this piece of shit corporate garbage game. I've always hated this game. Back when it came out, I thought it looked like shit. And the fact that, this game had, so much... It was also another game when it first came out. It was a part of that loot box craze of games that everyone fucking hated. Yeah, this game originally had loot boxes. So, even if you wanted to make the case, it changed up the way that, monetization. It was just like any other fucking game when it first came out. And as you saw, this was the fucking winner of the 2018 Game Awards. This is not only the biggest example of hoodie-itis that we've seen on this fucking stream, but represents everything that I fucking cannot stand about modern gaming now. Schlock and absolute horseshit gets rewarded. Meanwhile, games that take so much fucking time and effort and, take their time as far as, building a community and isn't just a part of some shitty trend, they get shafted. Abandoned. And that fucking depresses me. This is why I fucking hate these types of games. Because, and this is why I hate modern life service, modern just, always online. But that's another problem with this game. No matter what you do, this game will not be playable in once the servers are shut down, you can't play this game ever again. So all the thousands of dollars that you spent on microtransactions in this game and skins, wasted. They'll be gone in 10, 15 years when they shut down the servers. Mark my fucking words. You saying that this is your favorite game of all time, I'm not gonna fucking shit on anyone who says this is your favorite game. But I will have to question, does Epic really care? Do they actually genuinely care about maintaining this game as far as a long-term investment for your enjoyment? Or are they just doing it because they just make a ton of fucking money? And it basically made them become another game company like Valve or Rockstar when, they weren't working on Red Dead Redemption, where they just straight up don't make games. They just make live services. So Suffice to say, this is the most overrated fucking game of all time, and that's not gonna fucking change my mind. And the fact that this was the winner of this fucking thing only represents hoodie-itis and just the fact that it only made sense at the time. And thankfully, more and more people are agreeing with me. So, fuck this game. This game's a fucking terrible piece of shit. So, it's the AJR of video games for me. If you guys know, you know. So let's actually look at like an actual list of nominees that should have been. And by the way, Monster Hunter World's the fact that that's the only one that is acceptable on this entire row of things. That's pretty fucking pathetic and sad. Sea of Thieves shouldn't even be on here. Destiny 2 shouldn't even be on here either. It's the expansion that you can't even play anymore. So yeah, most of these are dog shit choices. Again, another fucking year of the Game Awards getting it all fucking wrong with multiplayer games. They've been doing this for years. Like, holy shit, man. So what did I choose? I chose actually awesome games. And games that I would hella recommend you guys actually play if you don't want to waste your time on games that will just straight up inevitably be removed from being able to be played. So obviously I chose Monster Hunter World again for its reasons I already explained, because obviously I gave it the fucking nod. So yeah, in A Way Out, a cooperative only experience that, by the way, doesn't require an internet connection. This game you can play offline, just like LAN if you really wanted to, making this a game that is replayable. But what about the other games? So, Vermintide 2, Warhammer Vermintide 2, a game that I've played a couple times on the stream before, actually. I haven't played it in a while. That's mostly because of just my computer. I mean, also just how large the file sizes were. I know they finally compressed the game, thank God. But as far as Left 4 Dead style of games are concerned, this is one of the best Left 4 Dead style of games to ever come out. Granted, obviously this is in the Warhammer universe, so it helps out a little bit, and you guys know how much I love Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar stuff, so having the game set in that version of Warhammer, I actually really do appreciate. And this game's fun, like, just as far as, like, action, hack and slash games are concerned, that are Left 4 Dead style, this one's a really good one. Light shooting mechanics as well, but that's not the main focus of the gameplay with this. So it's not like a traditional first-person shooter. It's not a first-person shooter, as a matter of fact. It's a hack and slash, just in first person, but a really good one. And then Insurgency Sandstorm. So the sequel to 2014's Insurgency, but honestly is better in every single way. And I'll even say this, along with Dusk, were the two best FPS games of 2018 by a fucking mile. It wasn't even close. Like, these were the best shooter games. This one obviously being on the more tactical shooter end. And this game, granted, there were some issues that people had with, like, the later updates for this game. People really despised the fact that this game became a bit more casual over time. But honestly, I think that was actually for the better for this game. Because, again, keep in mind, this game isn't supposed to be like an Arma or a Squad. Like, shit, I'll even say this. It's even a bit more accessible than something like CSGO. Because with CSGO, you need to know map design, and you need to know how to aim. Like, you need to know how the aim reticle works in that game. Like, this game is way more forgiving than CSGO, at least from my experience. And suffice to say, if you want, like, a pretty good entry-level tactical shooter, this is your best bet. Easily. Like, okay, Siege, fine. but like that game's a very arcadey tactical shooter. This one is arcadey as well, but like not to the same extent. And shit, I'll just straight up say this. This is definitely one of the best multiplayer PvP games that like I've ever played. I love this game's PvP. And even its PvE co-op mode, I think is really fun to play. So, yeah, no, I easily recommend this game. Even just this game alone dwarfs, like, all these other 4 nominees that the fucking Game Awards gave. Like, easily trumps all of those. So, go check it. And again, even if I end up even when I do end up choosing a winner, my goal is to basically just also kind of show you guys other games that you guys may be interested in and that I'm already interested in the first place. So go check out all these games. But of course, there has to be a winner. So what's the winner of this? So the award for the best multiplayer game of 2018 goes to Warhammer Vermintide 2. This is your fucking best multiplayer game of that year. Not some shitty battle royale, but a game that not only can you play offline and infinitely play for the rest of time, but also one of the best co-op experiences that you can ever have in any sort of game. Again, its gameplay is so much fun. It has tons of rewarding unlocks, which my one complaint is that, yes, unfortunately, this game does have a loot box system. That is a problem. But, and this is the only time you will ever hear me defend a loot box system, you don't pay a single dime for any of them. And they are only used against AI opponents. You do not use them in PvP. That right there is the biggest difference between a game like Vermintide 2 or even a game like Overwatch or the F-word game that shall not be named. The fact that like the loot boxes don't matter like at all and is not pay to win. And it isn't even in the case of like, you know, forced cosmetics or even stuff that you buy in game. It's just small little bonuses that you incrementally add up like throughout your playthrough. That is what makes a system like that way more rewarding. Is if it is a loot box system in which it is, you don't pay a single dime for them. Like, there's no in-game store for any of that shit. And it just adds slight buffs to your gameplay. Like, you know, kind of like the Gobblegums from Black Ops 3. Except with those, you actually can pay for those, which obviously that I would not recommend. But yeah, that is how, this is my prime example that I will always showcase to people on how, if you want to have a loot box gambling, I don't want to say gambling, but just kind of a loot box random chance game mechanic in your game, this is how you do it. So, and in that aspect, it is infinitely more rewarding. And of course, I already mentioned the fact that this game has both Skaven as well as Chaos Warriors, like Chaos Warrior and just general Chaos, Norskin, Nurgle enemies that you guys fight. And even with like the DLC, they added the Beastmen. Like, it adds so much variety to who you're fighting. And unlike my big issue with Left 4 Dead 2, where, you know, they spawn in a ton of special infected that are just, you know, designed to specifically be so annoying, the more specialized enemies in this game they're basically just more so just elite versions of enemies you're already fighting, with maybe the occasional kind of annoying enemy, but they don't spawn as often, making them more of a priority target that you have to go after on, the occasion on which you need to be strategic, rather than a regular annoyance. And that is infinitely why, and I'm just going to straight up say this controversial take, I think Vermintide 2 is infinitely better than Left 4 Dead 2 any day of the fucking week. I know that's a hot take, but that's my take right there. And that gets into the replayability. This game is infinitely replayable because it has the same director sort of mechanic that Left 4 Dead 2 has, but it is way more evened out. And, since there's different difficulties, and there's even a variety of different factions that you fight, it adds for a ton of different replay. Like, it adds in tons of ways for you to be able to experience this game, and you'll never have the same game twice. So, and of course, it's Warhammer Fantasy. So, but yeah, go check out Vermintide 2. As well as well as all of its DLC. Even like the newest DLCs that they've been released for free, but even the paid stuff is pretty awesome. So go check out Vermintide 2. It's worth it. Infinitely better than a stupid battle royale. So, which, speaking of DLC, let's talk about DLC. I like rewarding expansions and downloadable content for games that have come out. So, the Game Awards doesn't do this. This is something that I have decided to do. So, what do I think is the best DLC/expansions for a game? Well, interestingly enough, this is kind of a weird year because I feel like this year was definitely the year of amazing updates for games. So, added content to said game, as opposed to just, individual, bits and pieces of, paid content that, like, people paid for. These are, honestly, dare I say this, the best updates that some live services were able to provide. Wow, just fucking that fucking hurt a little bit, but okay, all jokes aside, this is how you do. These are updates that should be used as examples on how you can make live services good. If you are going to do a live service, that is. Let's go over that. So, two of these are more of a live service thing. The other two are paid DLC, but let's talk about the paid DLC first. Assassin's Creed Origins, The Curse of the Pharaohs. Now, Assassin's Creed Origins in and of itself, I do think it actually is a unironically really good RPG, and also a really good Assassin's Creed game. And I heard really good things about the DLC. And, well, this Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, I think, definitely, continued on with just the amazing stuff that they were able to do with that game. Similar to the Fates of Atlantis DLC with AC Odyssey that we talked about before. Like, the DLC for these games are really damn good and really expansive. Especially with this one, where it has a lot of more undead dealing stuff, and just a lot of the implications that this DLC has. I think it's definitely worthy of them potentially expanding on in the future, if they, decide to do so. So, yeah, I definitely think that this DLC is cool. And then we've got a DLC for a game that I initially put off on first, but I actually ended up growing to appreciating this game a lot, is Prey 2017, and the DLC that I heard everyone say is like the fucking best thing to come out of that game, Prey Mooncrash. Prey Mooncrash, I have heard that phrase so many times when looking up for this research. that Prey Moon Crash is the best fucking DLC for a shooter game in like 10 years. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it is a good DLC in its own right. Obviously, kind of continuing off of the storyline of what Prey was establishing and just kind of answering a few questions and just kind of, having some roguelite aspects. That's pretty cool. So, as far as DLC is concerned for shooter games, yes, Prey Moon Crash is a pretty good one. And then we've got some updates. So, again, this is kind of a weird one. And admittedly, I didn't think about this one whenever I was doing 2019, because I remembered now that, there was a huge Minecraft update in 1.14 that I should have fucking brought up. But let's talk about Minecraft 1.13. It's aquatic update. So, as you guys probably know, Minecraft, it started to kind of fall off by like 2015-ish. Like 2015 to about 2018, like Minecraft was kind of in a weird phase where they were releasing a bunch of updates that everyone and their mother hated. The most infamous one being 1.9, which broke combat, and I'm still stand by that like the combat in which we had from 1.8 to 1.9 is just annoying to deal with, and I wish there was an ability to turn it off, but they never ended up having that. So yeah, and then 1.10 being just basically nothing, and then 1.11 and 1.12. 1.12 adding a few cool, color-based things, but like not enough to really justify it being a memorable update outside of like 1.12.2 mods. That's when 1.13 comes around with the aquatic update, which completely overhauled oceans, because oceans were just barren with nothing to do with it in them at all. But this was the update that added all the new fish types, all the new coral, all the shipwreck. I think this added shipwrecks, if I'm not mistaken. I think, but it added in a ton of new stuff to do the ocean. It also introduced, I think, the drowned zombie, which added in the spear or the trident, which was the most powerful weapon at the time. And yeah, like this was kind of returned to form of just genuinely really good updates for Minecraft, because eventually we would get 1.14 in 2019, which is what I should have fucking added for 2019. I thought it came out in 2018. Turned out it came out in 2019. Again, that's an honorable mention for 2019. And then the 1.16 Nether update for 2020, which is one of the best updates that Minecraft has ever had. I will fully stand by that. My one issue is they got rid of fucking zombie pigmen and replaced them with piglins, but whatever. That's my only issue with that. But you get the point, is that like from like 1.8 to about 1.12, updates just were not as exciting for a lot of people. And to see an update as big as this come out was hella worth it. So good job, Minecraft. You gained back popularity a little bit after you added a bunch of fish to an ocean. And then we've got the final one that I was actually around whenever this came out. Operation Chimera for Rainbow Six Siege. No joke, this was probably one of the best times. It's not like, yeah, this was like one of the best times to be someone to play. This was one of the best times to play Rainbow Six Siege. And I remember I even streamed this event multiple times. It was that fucking addicting to me. So Operation Chimera was, in Rainbow Six Siege, they call operations as like their big DLC updates, right? Where they add in like one to three new operators in this case too, and pretty much just kind of add in a new map, or even just rework old maps, all that fun stuff. But for this update, they actually added in like an event. It was the Outbreak event, where there was, like Rainbow Six Extraction, right? That game was based off of this event. And it was essentially it wasn't a horde mode, but it was essentially I guess the best comparison would be like a mix between Extinction from Call of Duty and like a terrorist hunt thing from like older Rainbow Six games. Like it was a interesting hybrid of like those two systems, and it was really fun. Like I had a lot of fun playing this event, and honestly, like it was definitely like, and there are still people who still stand by that this was the best update in Rainbow Six Siege's history, along with the Operation Parabellum, which was the one immediately after this. Like 2018, at least from what I've heard from a lot of people, and even just a little bit of my experience with this, was definitely the best time to play Rainbow Six Siege. Like if you were like a huge co-op person, as I am, because I hate playing PvP games now. So no joke, this was no fucking joke. Like this is unironically one of the best things that like has happened in this game in particular. Yes, it did not match the tone of Tom Clancy's vision for like Rainbow Six. I understand that, but that doesn't mean that like this was that shouldn't take for granted for like just how fun this was. And that's why a lot of people were massively disappointed with Rainbow Six Extraction, because they really wanted it to basically just be a game like that, which in a lot of aspects it was just like that mode. It was just a bit more it's just people wanted to see if they could expand beyond it, and unfortunately they never did and never will, because the game flopped. So, and that's upsetting. But I still do hold my personal memories of the original Operation Chimera for Rainbow Six Siege, and I do hold it at least a little bit in my heart, because it was a really fun game mode. And I know I'm being kind of a hypocrite, but please actually kind of update like Rainbow Six Extraction at least a little bit. At least add like 2 more maps, please. Please. Like the fact that there's only fucking 4. Okay, that's a lie. There's 12 maps in Rainbow Six Extraction in total. It's 4 separate areas. So, but whatever. Just please add a little bit more to the game, please. Especially as someone who is a co-op person. Please. I know you guys are adding in the AI for people who just want to play offline, which that's a good thing, but please just for me, please. Whatever. Let's just let's announce the winner. So the best DLC expansion award goes to Prey Moon Crash. I basically had to choose this one. Although, to be fair, for good reason, because Prey 2017, I have to specify because there's 2 Prey games that are called Prey. It is a genuinely good game. And I do think that Prey Moon Crash, as far as, its continued storytelling, its progression, and just kind of the continued support of a pretty underrated game in its own right, I do have to respect. And yeah, just kind of the cool like things that they added in this expansion or DLC or whatever you want to call it is pretty warranted. So I would recommend checking it out if you guys haven't. All right, best remakes and remasters. Oh boy. So these are obviously older games that got revitalized. So this was admittedly a bit of a harder one to choose because there wasn't really much to work with for this. Which again, that should be the common thing for you guys, is that like all these categories, like the stuff that was on here that was good was really good, but like outside of the small grouping, it was not much. So, but I was able to choose just enough for this list. So Burnout Paradise was remastered. It is, Burnout being another old racing game series, though it was known for its like very violent and extreme car crashes and a little bit of like, cop chase sequences, which, like I said, is something that I already liked. So to see this game kind of get a remaster is pretty cool to see. And then we have Age of Empires Definitive Edition. I actually did stream this a couple times. Age of Empires being one of the older RTS game series, and you guys know I love RTS games, so it's no surprise that I would nominate this. My one complaint is that, like I mentioned before, they did fuck up the difficulty between easy and normal. If you try to play against AI on normal, it will be easy mode, but if you try to use easy mode, it will be normal mode. They fucked that up somehow. I don't know how you do that. That's a tiny complaint, but it is something that did get annoying. So just please, on Microsoft, please patch that. So if you haven't already. And then Dark Souls Remastered. So this one is another one that is admittedly kind of weird, because this is a remaster of a game that came out 7 years prior. So yeah, like I don't know. This was kind of a one that was a bit out of left field. But as someone who does respect Dark Souls and respects just Soulsborne games in general, even if they're not my favorite thing in the world, like, it's still cool to be able to see, them give a little bit of love to one of their older games. So, and it also helps that this game is pretty readily available. So, and then of course, you guys already see it. It's Spyro Remastered. So yeah, I really, really do love this Spyro Reunited trilogy. I obviously played it earlier this year, back in February. I played the first 2 Spyro games through this. I'm definitely planning on doing Year of the Dragon at some point. But yeah, like, I really do love these I know they're technically remakes because they remodeled, retextured everything, but they are using. But the thing is that it's more so a remake in the sense that like they just recreated literally every single little detail that was in the original game. It's not a remake in the traditional sense. It's like a remake stir, where it is a remake, but it's remade as if it's a remaster. So it's a remaster, kind of. It's a weird case. But regardless, though, I loved playing through the first 2 Spyro remake stirs for this, and I'm definitely excited to finish off with Year of the Dragon. Like, so, especially since like the first 2 did kind of give me a little bit of a throwback to my childhood whenever I first played the first 2 Spyro games. So I never played Year of the Dragon though, so that will be a new one for me. So, but I just remembered though, one more remaster that I actually did kind of forget to add to the list. And I'm going to make this one real quick. So, oh shoot. Yeah, I'm going to make this one real quick. So, I can't believe I forgot about this one because this one did come out in 2018. So, though I guess that is something that I have kind of realized is that like yeah, like there were a lot of remasters from like pre 2019, but like 2019 onwards was where the remakes really started to kind of come out. So, but yeah, I can't believe I forgot about this. Does anyone remember Red Faction Guerrilla? Yes, the game got remastered in 2018. I forgot it got remastered in 2018. And yeah, they just, reapplied some new textures and just kind of fixed, like, just tweaked a few things. Other than that, it's essentially the same game, but it is a really damn good game. So if you guys can, please check out Red Faction Guerrilla. Like, it is okay. It's not like the best game story wise, but as far as gameplay, mwah, chef's kiss. So check out Red Faction Guerrilla if you haven't. And the remaster is really damn cool looking. So, but yeah, as far as this, let's go over the remake remasters. So the award for the best remake remaster is gonna go to, and it should be pretty obvious, but I don't care, Spyro Reignited Trilogy. I'm a bit biased for this one because I just recently played this, but I still think that Spyro Reignited is the best way on which modern audiences can actually play the original Spyro games. And, well, it's frankly a return to form for Spyro after just the mess that he was in kind of after Year of the Dragon was released. They just did not know what to do with this purple little fella. And that makes me sad because I love Spyro. Like, okay, he granted, like, he wasn't as close to me as, like, a character like Sly Cooper, obviously, because, like, yes, I grew up with Spyro. I did play the PlayStation 1 games through my PlayStation 2, but, like, keep in mind that, like, I wasn't close to him all the time because of just the nature of it being a PlayStation 1 game. It was just kind of just before my time, like just before my time. But suffice to say, I still grew up with him, and I just relate to the gameplay way more because Spyro's gameplay, well, Sly Cooper, the first Sly Cooper games, general gameplay is directly based off of Spyro's gameplay. So if you guys have remembered me streaming Sly Cooper and then you guys compare it with me playing the first two Spyro games, very, very, very similar gameplay structure. So obviously there's a little bit of a bias there, but I don't care. I think Spyro is fun. And it also helps that these games are fucking beautiful. These remakesters are fucking amazing to look at. Like, easily some of the best visuals as far as like cartoony graphics go that like I've ever seen. And of course, they bring back the good old classic gameplay that everyone loved about the original trilogy. I'm really excited to play Year of the Dragon, but suffice to say, this is, in my opinion, easily the best out of all of the options that we had. So, even with Red Faction Guerrilla. Alright, here we go. Best art direction. It took us this long, but we finally reached this category. So, what did the Game Awards end up choosing? Not very good choices, if I'm going to be honest. So, Octopath Traveler and Return to Obra Dinn, I would actually agree with those. Because, you know, there's a style to them. Because, again, it's not about graphical fidelity, at least with art direction. Unfortunately, as you can probably tell, that's kind of what a lot of these people have in their mentality, is that, oh, it looks pretty, therefore it's best. Yeah, like, it may have high resolution, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, it may have a high graphical fidelity, but that doesn't mean it has, like, good art direction. And that's kind of what I try to avoid with these art direction, is that I try to avoid games that are more realistic looking just for the sake of giving credit where credit is due with the art style that a certain team was going for. Because even though I personally like more realistic looking games, even I have to stand by and be like, okay, this isn't the right game for this. And that's kind of what I feel about all three of, you know, with God of War, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Red Dead Redemption 2. Even though I actually like those games, I wouldn't necessarily say that they would be the best for art direction. Return to Obra Dinn was the one that won, and that's a fair pick. But what would be the ones that I would have chosen? Well, we've got 5 games this time around. Subnautica, Octopath Traveler, Dead Cells, Return to Obra Dinn, and Dusk. I've already gushed about just the visual style of pretty much all of these. Subnautica having a very cartoony 3D look to it, very, like, you know, old school. It's like new school, but old school, like, sci-fi look to it. It's kind of weird way to describe it, but that's kind of the vibe that Subnautica gets, at least, like, from what I can see. Not what I can see, but, like, just kind of what I get from whenever I look at, like, gameplay of Subnautica, or even just kind of play it myself. And that's pretty cool. And of course, Octopath Traveler and Dead Cells, both of those are very reminiscent to a lot of Super Nintendo games from, like, the early to mid 90s. And, you know, they try to replicate that sort of look, obviously in 2 different ways. Octopath obviously being more Final Fantasy influenced, while Dead Cells being more Castlevania influenced. But regardless, it's still a really cool. They're both still really cool looking, and it's an art style that admittedly is pretty timeless. Like, just the, you know, just that super, like, again, that's why I really love and respect the Super Nintendo, because it is the kind of the first era in which you can truly call those games timeless. So can't really say that much about, like, NES or really just anything before that. And, well, Dusk does the same thing, except for late 90s, a little bit early 2000s PC, like, shooter games. The game basically just straight up looks like Quake. But that's not a bad thing. It's inspired by Quake. So, and, well, yes, it definitely does take cues from even other games as well. Most notably, Blood and, I guess a little bit of, like, Doom. A little bit. It's more Blood and Quake influenced, I feel like, as far as its visuals are concerned. So, like, that's kind of what I see with that. It's basically just if Blood 2 was a good game. Actually, now I think about it, Dusk is basically, yeah, it's basically just Blood. What the fuck? Again, to be fair, this is the Blood 2 that people wanted. So, yeah. But whatever. And then we've got Return to Obra Dinn, which I already mentioned is, you know, it has like a pixelated art style, like a pixelated 3D art style, which does look really cool. Even though I'm not a big fan of the gameplay or just kind of that style, I do respect its art direction. I gave respect to Scorn for the same reasons. So, but let's get this over with. So, the award for the best game for best art direction will go to Octopath Traveler. I was kind of debating on between this and not Blood Dusk, because they're pretty much doing kind of a similar thing where it's like they're both paying homages to like both parts of the 90s. This in the early 90s and then Dusk in the late 90s. But I ultimately decided to choose Octopath Traveler because this is a AAA game that was doing this. This is not an indie game or a AA. Like, you would expect like a AAA game to just kind of go full on in with 3D graphics and just kind of use that as the way that they were going to go for. But Octopath Traveler is not. It's a AAA game that doesn't do that. It went back to an old school style of Final Fantasy or just JRPG from the 90s. And like, I respect that. And it shows that like even when you have like, it even shows that like if you just allow for a little bit of creative freedom, like you can have a ton of like talented people work on a project even despite them being under like the tight corporate ends of a publisher. Like, allow that creative freedom to thrive and you can make an amazing product. So, and again, just that sort of Super Nintendo throwback. Again, this is a AAA game. Like, this is like that is doing that. Like, that's just insane to me. So, but yeah, that's my pick. Octopath Traveler easily picks is the best art direction, and I ultimately chose that just because like any indie game can kind of make whatever game look like whatever they wanted. So, and it is impressive, but to me it stands out even more when like a AAA publisher does that, because you just don't see that anymore from AAA publishers. So, Square Enix, by the way. So, yeah. All right, best story, best narrative. So, this is a bit of a weird one. Cuz best narrative is that's the problem with 2018, is that like again, the games that I ended up choosing really do fit well with this. But man, 2018 was also the year of just not really good stories in games. So, but let's look at the nominees that were chosen at the Game Awards. So what did they choose? Of course. I mean, God of War and Red Dead Redemption 2, that needs no explanation. I already told you those make sense. Spider-Man, again, I already told you I don't care for Spider-Man. It's just not my thing. So I would not choose Spider-Man. Detroit Become Human and Life is Strange 2. Two games that I don't think I've ever heard a single soul talk about in like 6 years. And I'm not joking when I say that. I have not heard a single person talk about Detroit Become Human in basically the year since it came out. And it doesn't help that this is a David Cage game, which I don't know if you guys know this, but I can't stand those types of games, because it's just, he's just the most pretentious motherfucker ever. Because yes, your choices do matter in these types of games, which that is one thing I will admit is actually kind of cool about games that are directed by David Cage, is that like Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human, Beyond Two Souls, shit like that, is that like your choices do actually matter, And so you have to make sure that like you're doing the right thing. Otherwise you're gonna like, yeah, you have to deal with the consequences of like the actions that you make in said games. That I do actually respect, because at least at least it's more real than Telltale games. Anyways, so yeah, as far as like that concerned, like I do think that's pretty cool. I just fucking think that like story, like I just really fucking hate these types of games though, because these aren't really games, like, I mean, they basically just made as well just be interactive movies. That's what they are. And that's not even a new concept. I remember these types of like those types of media were common in the late, like in the 2000s. Like this wasn't like a new game changing thing. This has been a thing for a while. So I don't know. Like again, it's not like this is the worst thing in the world, but it definitely wouldn't be my top pick. And then as for Life is Strange 2, granted, if Goldie was here, he would be on a fucking tirade on how much he fucking hates Life is Strange. But I'll give you guys the short of this because I mostly agree with him. It's mostly just kind of pretentious, very, it's basically just very, okay. It's mostly what I was talking about earlier, where it's like, I don't like more interpersonal story-based shit. I never cared about that stuff, and that's what Life is Strange as a series is. And I just don't care. That has just never appealed to me with any of these games. And it also doesn't help that like a lot of like the main characters that you do end up playing as, you're kind of fucking assholes. Like, you're just so like, I don't agree with the term poser, but you're just kind of, it just feels fake. It just feels forced. It's just forced drama for the sake of being forced drama. And again, in a lot of instances, granted there's a little bit more interactivity in Life is Strange to be fair, but like again, similar to David Cage movies, is that they have the problem of being more interactive movie than they are video game. So no thanks. Thankfully though, the winner from the Game Awards ended up being Red Dead Redemption 2. Pretty valid choice. But are there better choices that we could have made? Well, turns out we can. A Way Out and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. If you wanted an interactive narrative being told throughout your entire game, A Way Out infinitely does it better than any Dave Cage game, because you're actually in the game itself with another player experiencing it too. And that sort of dynamic of just breaking out of prison in that collaborative effort is just a way more compelling story than some fucking, petty, cybernetic asshole, or just kind of like some weird interpersonal stuff. Like, if that's your thing, that's fine. I just can't stand that shit. So, and then of course we got Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is of course the final part of the 2010s Tomb Raider trilogy. And yeah, again, it's so weird that this game just did not get as much attention when it first came out. Like, I don't know. I mean, it definitely helps that this does take place in Mexico. Like, that is a pretty cool setting to kind of end things off. Even if I kind of wish they would have done an Egyptian setting. Although, to be fair, there was the Lara Croft spinoff game from several years prior that was in Egypt, so it would have probably been weird, but whatever. Point is that, like, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, yeah, it's fun. And, it kind of finalizes some of the questions that people were asking with the previous Tomb Raider games about this version of Lara Croft, and just kind of a lot of the mysteries that were still being surrounded. So Suffice to say, yeah, I would definitely say that this is a good choice. But there can only be one winner. So the award for the best narrative of 2018's video games goes to Red Dead Redemption 2. I kind of had to do this. It was weird not to, but I do agree with the Game Awards on this choice. This is how you write prequels, because again, this is actually a prequel to the first game, which is kind of weird, but you know. And just kind of the way in which the not only just the characters kind of interact with each other, but just the way in which the immersive like storytelling is told. Like, this may sound weird, but this is one of those games that not only do the cutscenes and even just kind of the general just walking around characters kind of tell the story, but also just the environments help with telling the story itself as well. Like, this is an example of environmental storytelling in a video game done right. And obviously, main character Arthur Morgan just kind of being like obviously kind of leading up until the events of the first game, like slowly but surely, but just kind of him in some weird ways kind of being a relatable character. Obviously, you know, not in the sense that like, you know, you would definitely do everything that he would do, because that's not what I mean about when it comes to like Rockstar games. But a lot of the more recent Rockstar games, I will say, as far as like their baseline story campaigns, you know, like stuff with like GTA and Red Dead Redemption 1, like they know how to make characters that, while yes, they may not seem like it, they actually do have at least some semblance of relatability to the player. And that's something I do appreciate. So, as far as Rockstar Games is concerned, that is one thing I will always give them credit, is that they are able to write compelling protagonists. So, but of course, can they strike it hard enough to win Game of the Year? Well, let's see what the Game Awards thought first. Again, it's about 50-50. I would definitely agree with Monster Hunter World, God of War, and Red Dead Redemption. I think I've made it pretty obvious that those three I do agree with. The only one I slightly disagree with would be Celeste, but again, it just doesn't really seem like my thing. Same thing with Spider-Man. And then Assassin's Creed Odyssey, again, I just don't really see it. Like, I get it that okay, this is coming from someone who actually does like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I'm not trying to shit on the game. It's just in comparison to other Assassin's Creed games, and especially other RPG games from 2018, it just does not stack up in comparison on an objective level. So, yeah. But what ended up winning for the Game Awards? God of War. Valid and fair. What would I have nominated instead? Well, funny enough, this is actually the first time I'm nominating 5 for Game of the Year. Yeah, I know, I never do that. I only did 4 for the most part. But I decided that I'm actually going to nominate Frostpunk and Shadow of the Tomb Raider here as well. Which I don't know why I did not write that down. Hold on, let me, before we reveal this, let me make sure that I fix that, because I don't want to accidentally reveal the winner quite yet. Because, yeah, I have no idea if I'm going to accidentally do it or not. So, there we go. So, yeah, again, I would be you know, I feel like I would just be like, beating a dead horse by saying Frostpunk is amazing, and that Monster Hunter World is amazing, and that Shadow, Tomb Raider, and God of War are pretty good, and then Red Dead Redemption 2 is also amazing. Like, I would be being a dead horse. You guys already know. So, and admittedly, I am kind of getting tired, so I want to wrap this up. So, the titular game of the year, the final award of the night. Who's the winner? Well, if you paid attention, you probably have an idea of what it's going to be. The last award of the night. The best game to represent 2018. The titular game of the year award goes to Red Dead Redemption 2. Yeah, I do respect the God of War pick. I genuinely do. Like, I would definitely agree with people who would say that God of War would be a good choice for Game of the Year. However, I think where I have to disagree is just the amount of not only content that's in this game, but just what this game was able to achieve. I do consider Red Dead Redemption 2 honestly to being Rockstar's crowning achievement. Like, the 20 years that they've been making games, whether it be GTA or Red Dead, or even just a lot of the other games that they publish, like LA Noire and, Bully and stuff like that, honestly was kind of leading up to a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 being released, which again has such a compelling narrative that, yes, is a prequel, but still was able to tell its own story. A Western story, may I remind you. And frankly, this is the best game to be set in the Wild West. Like, name me another game that is as, grandiose when it comes to its Wild West setting. I mean, maybe, like, I don't know, Call of Juarez Gunslinger? But, like, again, that's stretching a bit. Like, Desperados? No. Gun? No. It's Red Dead Redemption 2. And I have to give credit where credit is due by kind of making Westerns cool again. In a obviously in a way more appropriate way, by the way, may I add you, because most Western content is racist as shit. So, in that aspect, it was able to do the setting justice and tell it in a pretty authentic way. And admittedly, that's kind of why I do respect Red Dead way more than I do GTA, mostly because Red Dead is a bit more serious overall, as opposed to just GTA kind of half joking a lot of the time, and it kind of gets annoying. Red Dead does it takes itself a bit more seriously. And of course, a huge open world and the varied side activities really do carry this. And like I said, its engaging narrative really does carry the weight of the game, and the gunplay itself is, really fun to mess around with. And last but not least, this is actually Goldie's favorite game of all time. Like, this is his personal favorite game of all time, which that didn't necessarily play into it, but it's just kind of cool to be able to kind of, give him a little bit of a nod because of that. So, you're welcome, Goldie. So, let's recap, shall we? So, to recap the awards, the best indie game that we chose was Frostpunk. The best game by a new studio we chose was Subnautica. The best action adventure we chose was Hitman 2. Best RPG was Monster Hunter World. Best sim strategy was Frostpunk. Best racing sports fighting game was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Best multiplayer was Warhammer Vermintide 2. Best DLC was Prey Mooncrash. Best remake / remaster is Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Best art direction is Octopath Traveler, and then best narrative and game of the year went to Red Dead Redemption 2. As for my personal top 10 favorites of 2018, as a bonus round, these are my favorites. So Monster Hunter World, Frostpunk, Red Dead Redemption 2, Two Point Hospital, Dusk, Hitman 2, Spyro Reignited Trilogy, Warhammer Vermintide 2, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Insurgency and Storm. Not in any particular order, by the way. Yeah, it's again, 2018 was definitely a weird year for sure. Like, I don't know. Oh, an honorable mention goes to Subnautica. But I don't know. Yeah, like this year was just, it was a weird year. Because again, the games that did kick ass really did kick ass. I just feel like a lot of games were just kind of underwhelming. Or just straight up sucked from this year. Obviously, that's not to say that there weren't any guilty pleasures, because there were plenty of guilty pleasures of mine. These games would not qualify at all, but I have a bit of a soft spot for them. So, Bloons Tower Defense. Remember, going back in like 2008 on your school computer and going on to Cool Math Games and playing some Bloons Tower Defense? Well, I did, and I like Bloons Tower Defense. So, and the fact that like they made a 6th one is mind-boggling, but yeah, they did in 2018, and it's pretty great. So yeah, and then yeah, Strange Brigade, which I actually did play on stream a couple times, just kind of another cooperative Left 4 Dead style game. It's a pretty unique one. It's just didn't really get much attention. Call of Cthulhu 2018 looks pretty interesting. Horror RPG, kind of a remake of the 2005 game in Adjacent. So, yeah. And then, yes, I do actually like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's just not good enough to be on the list. And truth be told, I do also like Battlefield 5. It just launched like hot shit. And even after all the updates, it still doesn't really have enough content to justify it. I still like the game, though. I like a lot of Battlefield games. It just does not have enough. And then, of course, we got Just Cause 4, which, again, is a game that I do like, but it also launched like hot shit. They had to revamp the whole game in order for it to play. But it's Just Cause. I like it. I prefer this way more than Far Cry 5 any day of the fucking week. Fight me on that one. But regardless, that is the Caspian Game Awards of 2018. So, yeah, a lot. Oh my god. So, yeah, 2018 was definitely a weird year. It had its ups, it had its downs, and it had its really, really stinking lows. But it was definitely an interesting year regardless to kind of talk about and just kind of reminisce about. But stay tuned. 2017, it will definitely be in the works. I will not be doing it next week, though, because I am going to be gone for a trip. So it will most likely be in the May the 4th. Great. We do an episode on 420, because I just remembered it is 420. And now I'm going to do an episode on May the 4th. God damn it. So, whatever. I hope you guys at least enjoyed this. Like, I enjoy talking about these things and just kind of giving out my personal takes and just kind of doing a lot of research on just gaming history in general. Of course, like I said, we are going from like newest down. So next time we will be talking about 2017. If you guys did enjoy, if you guys did end up enjoying this, please make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn on the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. Like I added, make sure to check out the links down below as well, specifically SoundCloud and YouTube. Discord's still shut down. I will have that turned on hopefully by May. And if you guys haven't already, you can also hit the subscribe button. If you can't necessarily do that, that's completely fine. I'm just glad that you guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream to other people as well and continue to be awesome people in the process. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night, guys.